to the Tough Fish Show. I am so excited to bring to you Meg Nocero. Meg, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. My God, this is already fun. I know it.
Yeah, we've been chatting before this, and I am so excited to actually now be hitting record so we can chit chat even more so. But would you please start with, how did you get into writing?
Oh my God. So how do you get into writing? As a kid, it was a place where I was able to park all my emotions in my journals, right? We all start with the basics. Oh my God, this is what happened to me today. I don't know, my friends hate me or they love me or they whatever me, it was always the journals for me. But, I have to start there because everyone's love for language starts by the pure expression in our own words, in our own safe places, in our own, whatever they call it, and then ultimately, what came about as an affinity to actually write, stemmed from those playing with the words. And I speak 4 languages. I always wanted to break down, starting with Latin and then all the rest, right? Latin, I did the Romance languages, like Italian, Spanish, French, sometimes English. So I'm a big, I like to call myself a wordsmith. I can actually say that because someone actually left a review that said she's a wordsmith. So I own it now.
Oh, I love that. So a few things you've just said that I really appreciate. One, that writing was a safe space. It created a safe space at first. And I think that that's such a beautiful way to see it initially, especially, or when you're writing that first draft, because it needs to be you connecting with that piece, finding your voice, finding that story in there. So it has to feel safe to you. And then I love that you're owning the words that come. So like I've had a previous guest where we talked about owning the word author or owning the word being a writer or owning those type of things. So I love that. Owning wordsmith is just as important. So that's phenomenal.
Oh, thank you. Honestly, it does take a bit to start stepping into whatever that is for you, whatever is author, lawyer, doctor, Indian, and whatever that is. But once you start to say, yes, I am, whatever follows that I am, it becomes, oh my God, then you become that, what you say you are, right? And I try to keep it on the positive end. If I bring the negative up, it's too much of a spiral into, where, into the Dante's Inferno, perhaps. But I love to read. So reading and writing certainly are 2 of my favorite things. Absolutely.
So I love what you just said a moment ago too, with the whatever comes after I am is kind of looking for you, because that's something that I believe too. I think that your words are so powerful, and not just as a writer, when you are crafting your story, whether it's nonfiction or fiction, really you're crafting a story for your reader to either go on a journey or go on some kind of transformation. So those words really are powerful, what you're creating, but you're also creating something powerful for yourself. So by telling yourself, yes, I can do this, even if it's just, I take, a few steps here, I write out just this chapter or just this section, you're putting yourself in that motion of saying, I can do this, I can do it this. And the more you do this, the more you keep showing up, you'll have a book, you get to do conversations, because you got to talk about what you publish.
Yes, absolutely. And, I'll go back to the music component, since you are a music aficionado also, is that it's so funny because I've always wanted to play piano. I took lessons as a kid, but how you transcribe the words that come through me, I sometimes pretend that I am playing a piano, like a piece, a symphony that's coming out. And sometimes you're like, stop, slow down. I can't keep up with you, or sometimes it just flows and you're just like, oh, as if somebody or something is speaking through you. And it's really quite fascinating. It's like dancing with words on the page when you're in the flow. When you're not in the flow, it's like hitting your head against the wall multiple times, hoping that something loosens up there. But reality is, when it feels that alignment to the flow of the words, the story you're trying to tell and bring to life, basically you want the words to pop off the page as if it's a scene actually happening. That's that's masterful and exciting and just amazing, wonderful feelings.
So let me ask you, because I totally agree that when you're in that flow, you can feel that and you want that for that reader. But what happens? What would you advise someone maybe if they're stuck right now and they're saying, yeah, I want my words to dance off the page, but right now they're not even like moving on the page. How do I get past this? What would you say to them?
Well, I do this wonderful tool of mine. I take my page and I start on actually freehand, not typing. Because if I get stuck, the typewriter is, or the keyboard is not going to help me. It's the freehand. It's like where the connection lies. And I'll start writing blah, 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 blah. Yes, I will, because that is exactly what's happening in my head at the time. And like how I wanted, like, and then other tools I use, I try to act, because I'm a former federal prosecutor, I'm an attorney by trade. So I always pretend that I'm interviewing the character who wants to be heard. So what is it that you want to say? Tell me. And I'll just start dictating. Okay, well, it's a beautiful day outside. I'm walking around. The story is coming out. I met this person and this whole conversation ensues. Okay, I can dictate. I can take notes, right? I can take that so I can build a case, because that's my tool set, right? I go back to what it is that I use best. And I think each person who shows up, listen, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's tons of wisdom you've gained throughout time. My God, from here to there to everywhere. If you use the things that resonate with you or you have agency over, then it can be an opportunity to get through your blocks. Like some people are great researchers. They get excited when they're researching a topic that they're writing on. That's what gives them the fuel to keep going. Like, for instance, something comes up and like you said, you get curious. Why is this showing up in my life? Is there something that needs to be investigated? That's something that can like break through the doldrums. Or perhaps there's a person in your neighborhood who's interesting to you, and that might be a really great character. I always say, the pen is mightier than the sword. Anytime, and anyone who, like, for lack of better words, screws me over, beware, I'm a writer.
Oh my gosh.
You might just show up on the page. If you're lucky, I have to say that I will give you I don't tend to write nasty, so I'm not like that, but sometimes it feels very cathartic, I think, for sure. A great processing.
Goodness. But Meg, you mentioned a few things here that I'd love for you to help transition us, really. So background in law, federal law, and to your point, I love that you talk about leveraging a tool set, a skill set that you have, and allowing that, like the interviewing process. I encourage that all the time. If you have a scene happening or a character, maybe the character needs to tell you more, and to interview them, find out what's going on. And I love that idea of writing the blah, blah, blah until something really starts to shake out for you. But how did you transition from a federal job, to becoming this writer, this speaker, a coach type of thing? How did that happen? And how did butterflies fit into all of that?
Well, followed by, it's so funny because when people where I was cross-examining in court, they always start with bueno, and they would have to think. So I was like, oh God, are they going to get creative, or are they going to tell the truth? So now I'm going to tell you the truth. The reality is that sometimes those things that you most want to do may begin very early in life, but as you go on, you forget that is something that you need to do. And for me, when I was a kid, like I told you, I journaled. I wrote this book called Hello Fellow, about this young lady who was just, kind of like the woman, the young girl that I wanted to be, that I wasn't, because I was bullied when I was a kid, and my world wasn't as nice as some people. When you go to school, it's like kind of hiding to escape, it really is, something that I kind of own now. I had it in my life. For a while it was shameful, because I felt shame about it, because I was like, why me? But now I'm like, okay, well, I got through that, it's made me who I am today. So back to the whole progression of things. I think I became an attorney for two reasons. I wanted to learn to speak up for myself. I wanted to learn what I, get that confidence, because when you're able to advocate for others, I think in many ways you start to really advocate for yourself. Like, so for instance, if someone comes to you and you're like, well, that's just so wrong, it's easier for me to speak for you than it would be for me. But soon you're like, well, why can't I speak up for myself? So that's part one of the process. Once I got the confidence to tell my story, right? Because the vulnerability needs to come through. And if it's not authentically you, nobody really cares. Nobody wants to read it. If you're not showing what's happened to you for purposes, whatever the world wants to take away and use it for, then people are going to be like, this lays flat, it falls flat. It's like there's something missing. They're not being honest or not integrous or whatever you want to call it. So for me, what happened was I had a story I wanted to tell. I wanted to show the world through my eyes, this magical world that I know exists. I experienced it on many different, facets. And I wanted to be in that, sharing my inspiration with others. The thing that was really holding me back was, how am I going to support myself doing this, right? I have a safe job, federal government job. I have benefits and everything. And I was like, do I want to jump from there, to the unknown, this uncertain world? And I will tell you, it, for me, was like a butterfly. I had to go through the process of metamorphosis, right? Where you crawl around like a caterpillar, you have to go into the chrysalis, deal with your darkness, and then eventually you're going to burst out and start to fly a little higher. Now, the reason why I decided to burst out and fly a little higher was because, as all things, you have those wake-up calls in your life where something really big happens and it just knocks you to your knees, throws you on the ground, and you're like, well, what am I going to do now? It's going to really call into question, are you here for this calling? Are you going to take that chance or not? And for me, it was when I lost my mother to breast cancer in 2011. So wow. That was my wake-up call. My books have come from the space of needing the inspiration for me to walk through a very dark time in my life, so that I could see my light or the light, or others showed me their light, so I could get to the end, perhaps, of that tunnel. And it started becoming a conversation with my life. My mother, before she passed away, said, stress is going to kill you. And literally, I think that, the inordinate amount of stress that we all deal with, I mean, there's normal stress and then there's off the charts. Oh my God. And it goes into an anxiety state, or, your neural pathways are just shot to hell, right? That's not healthy. That is not a normal, that's not a good place to be, because you feel like there's not much you can do and you might slide into a depressive state. Okay. That was what was happening to me. And I had to start asking the questions to pull myself from there. And when I did, then this whole other world opened up for my creative side to come out. Because the other thing she said is, don't have any regrets when it's your time. Well, and I'm looking around at what I'm doing, where I am, and I have a beautiful life. I had 2 very young kids, but I didn't feel like whatever I needed to express was coming out. My vocation wasn't being followed. At least it was, and certainly with the government, you kind of held to, a box, because you aren't really able to speak your truth. There's kind of, you navigate the agency in a certain way. But I started writing, I started blogging, I started following my insights. And then I wrote this book called The Magical Guide to Bliss, 366 Insights. Then I turned around and I started following my guide. It starts with Carpe Diem, seize the day in January, ends with awe-inspiring magic and miracles. And my memoir is all about what happened in my life when I decided to take my own advice.
I think that, so I have goosebumps. I'm just saying, I think that is just absolutely awesome, because you're right, that there is a vulnerability that needs to be there, especially when you're writing a memoir, but there's a vulnerability when you're writing in general, so you can connect with that reader, so the readers can basically, they see themselves, or they can feel, you get what I'm going through, you understand me, especially when it's something like nonfiction and memoir. They want to see themselves, they want to feel like you understand, and you can maybe hold my hand through something. So I think that's courageous. And I think that that's absolutely, absolutely awesome how you were willing to take a big leap of faith. And there
Yeah.
had to have been dark spots to go through in order to become the butterfly, just like you said.
Yeah.
So as you were working on the memoir, how did you know when to include certain things and when to say, I don't think I need to, I don't want to necessarily mention this, or I don't need to mention this? How did you strike that balance?
Well, the first couple drafts were very angry drafts because
That's fair. That's fair.
yeah, you know, when you have one dream, right? And you spend 20 years in that on that path, and you've come against I would say a wall, you know, you have to either, well, they say find a way around it, or you have to redirect, right? And then I think that to get to that place where I was able to be vulnerable, I had to go through the stages of grief. And I think anyone who's read Elizabeth Kubler-Ross knows their stages, right? But, you know, for instance, for me, a lot of the anxiety was crippling for me, you know, and I knew that I couldn't stay where I was because I literally, my body was showing up, having panic attacks, things like that. I did have a wonderful experience when I started writing Magical Guide. I started getting these feelings of possibility again. And there's nothing better when you start to come alive to your purpose and align that with passion. And, you know, certain things started happening for me. And in my book, I talk about how, you know, I was on stage with Oprah in front of 15,000 people, and she's telling me it's time to live the life you want. And I'm like, okay, these are big signs. What do I do now? Do I ignore it? No. I mean, how do you literally face people or like, well, something like that happens and you just sit there and you still do the same thing. And somewhat like literally you have permission to show up in your life differently. And for me, I was like, well, how am I going to do that? I mean, like, how am I? So I started getting curious once again and started asking those questions. And as I did, doors started opening. Some of them closed, some doors, pretty big doors in my life, my career, my first career closed. They were closing in my face. Not only were they closing in my face, but like literally shoved me out the door. It was like, it wasn't this gentle, but I don't believe a butterfly bursting out of a chrysalis is a gentle experience. I think it's like and it's kind of like, a spaceship going out into the atmosphere, outside of the Earth's atmosphere is a huge thrust. It's a big push. And then you start to be able to be in the flow of your life again. So for me, I don't like the uncomfortableness of uncertainty in life. I pretty much will have a temper tantrum if it gets too much. I'm being honest. But the reality is, I felt like for me, my mission with regard to all of this was that I wanted to speak to that person who may be sitting in their closet, completely devastated by whatever loss or whatever life experience they're going through, feeling like this is it, this is the end, suicidal ideation. I wanted to be able to reach in there through sharing my story and saying, hold on, because it gets better. And the reality is if this was my promise to myself as I was going through it. Meg, don't you dare give up. Don't you dare give up, because you can use your life as inspiration, which is really something that I get so excited about. Like some days I need inspiration from you, Jen. I mean, your beautiful smile, your beautiful face, this having conversations, I need it. But I know where to go. I know to the experts where I need to go. And if I can offer the same, then what a gift to be of that kind of service in this world.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I love that you talked about how the way you wrote your books were reader centric. Yes, they were for you and they enabled you to offer value, to offer inspiration, to offer a hand and offer encouragement and practicality too. There's things to actually, here's some things to help you. But in the same breath, they are reader centric. They are focused on serving that reader. And I think that when you are able to make sure that the writing is there for the reader, to serve the reader, that's going to come through. That you can feel that when you're reading it, when you're writing it, there's just something that comes out because you are focused on service. I think that's the heart of so much nonfiction in particular, is that it is an act of service.
Yeah. I do love the idea that when you're in a really kind of, maybe a sad place or stuck place, that service is one of the things that can break you free, like helping someone else, believe it or not, like even as so small as, sharing, kind words to someone else when you need it yourself. But the bottom line is like, well, what can I do? What can I do to kind of shake me out of the doldrums? And sometimes I just go back in my closet myself. I'm like, this, okay, I'm going to give in. I'm too tired right now, and then I'll wake up the next day and hopefully have a better, take on the world. But if I can, I am very aware or highly conscious of what it is that I can do differently, then I'll go out there and I will try to be of service to someone else too. And I mean, I that's where the magic can happen. I think that, if we're talking about, what brings you to your bliss, I say the more generous a person is, the better off you are, because it comes back. And I always love to say that karma is a mirror. What you give out into the world is returned right back to you. I mean, maybe that's not the reason why you do it, but it's certainly a great result of going out there and just being in this world and trying to be a really bright light, where I experienced others' light to pull me out of my own darkness. I want to do the same as far as who do I can touch at the other end of the spectrum.
I love that so much. And I'm a very big believer in being that bright light for yourself, and to shine that on others and encouraging others. And so when you've got your book, you have Butterfly Awakening, you have this book, you have Magical Bliss, you have these books. But part of that sharing that light is actually getting out and talking about it, is actually, having conversations and letting people know they're there. Yeah. What was that like for you to be able to not just take the work that you created and have it in physical form, but to then talk about it?
Well, I am so grateful that my first book was The Magical Guide to Bliss, because while there are parts of my story in it, it is an inspirational book. It is those things that pull us through the year and have us seeing things differently. It's, I think, a retraining perhaps of the brain to maybe shift your perspective. And my only judgment or concern was the people going to execute my writing, because lawyers are tough. Lawyers are tough. I mean, listen, I am very, very precise with the words that I try to use, and, putting it out to another party, judges, appellate board. I know the criticism can come back. So I do my best. So putting my first one out there, The Magical Guide to Bliss, and getting so much back from that bolstered my confidence. It kind of shifted from that imposter syndrome, like, who am I to be an author? I should have stayed in my lane. So having my book number 2, which was Sparkle and Shine, it's 108 mantras to guide you through your day. Having that out there too was more of a playful, playing with the whole I ams that we're speaking to, those mantras that help us to affirm how we want to be in this world, and in a playful way. So then putting out my memoir, this vulnerable story, I was like, at that point, I was like, okay, listen, I know I can write. I know that I've had a wonderful, dialogue or, back and forth with my audience, people who have in fact followed me over the years. I think they will be kind. I think that they'll be kind to that vulnerable side of me that really was terrified to share, because, a lot of people I don't realize how, I see how strong you are, but I don't realize the weak parts of you, which is what all of us are. Literally, it's like, if you have no insecurities, I don't know if humanity is your thing. I mean, certainly, embracing those, saying, imperfect, I say perfectly flawed. I've got things to work on, even some things that make me, crazy, or those triggers from my, childhood habits that keep coming up. They make me like, oh God, here we are again. I'm still doing this. Oh, please. But at the end of the day, sharing my story out there to someone, like I said, back to the beginning, to that person who may be feeling completely lost, or, what am I going to do? Where I was this strong person that everyone else is seeing. I was falling apart. By that and all the things that followed, once I reaffirmed my desire to pull myself out of where I was, and then also shifting my perspective on the losses of my life, rather than complete failures, there are opportunities or greatest opportunities to learn. So putting the Butterfly Awakens out there into the world, it's like a butterfly. Once it goes, it flies around, and whatever the world does to it is up to the world, whose hands get on it or grab on it, and just hopefully they'll take away something that will make a difference in their life is my intention. It certainly has made a difference in my life to have the opportunity to share it. Like you say, be the authors out there speaking about your books. And the gift of that is the conversation. And I love this. I think it was Ethan Hawke who said it, the best movies. And I think books are tantamount to movies, because when you read them, if you're a good writer, you're experiencing that visual on the screen in your mind's eye, having all the feels, etc. But he said the best movies are the ones when the last scene, the end, the conversations begin. And there's nothing better than to have these kind of conversations, because at the end of the day, they make us better. This dialogue we have with each other about so many things. And we all know the world has a lot of things to talk about right now. But to have those conversations where we decide that we want a better way, a better place, a better us, that's where the magic begins as well.
I love that. I love how you framed that, in the sense that the book is enabling, something else, like that next step. And that next step is that conversation. And what I see too, something that you did, which I think was also smart, in the sense that you had a memoir that you wanted to write, and maybe it wasn't ready as a first book or a second book, but you allowed the space to say, and maybe even if it wasn't a conscious decision at the time, but it was I wrote something I was excited about, that I could talk about, that I felt that was light, or that was something that I was really, really energized to do. Yeah. And it's not that you weren't energized about the memoir, but it served a different purpose.
Yeah.
Therefore, it required something different. And maybe it needed to be a second or third book versus the first book. And I love that, because sometimes I think that that's also important, that we might put a lot of weight on what that first book ought to be, versus following that joy that's coming, whatever that is that you're writing, if it's inspirational, if it's a prescriptive nonfiction, or if it's a whole fiction novel that you've mapped out because it's just the world that you were excited to create. When you're excited about it, it will flow. And as you keep going, as you keep writing, you'll hone your skills and your craft, and each thing you produce will just be stronger and stronger, because you put yourself out there.
Yeah, I think, especially with memoir, and, especially you've written about leadership, it's like, once you put it out there, like, what are they going to do to me now? What are they going to say? Okay, well, there's critics out there who literally their job is to completely rip you apart and tear you down, and then accentuate it with these wonderful things. I hate to be somebody like that, but the bottom line is you're always looking for something, to bring out, to validate your existence. But at the, like, for you and me, perhaps at this point, you with your picture books and your leadership books and my nonfiction, I think the offering, when it comes from a place of, this is what I have today to share with you. And then as I can grow in this endeavor and this skill and this mastering, then tomorrow's could be even different and better. Who knows? But, you always look at the different authors in this world. I mean, they didn't just start, it's a journey of 1,000 miles, begins with the first step. So, they didn't just like show up. I always like the ballerina with their toes, this beautiful prima ballerina dancing, and you see the mangled toes of how much practice it took for that person to get there. Well, that is exactly the same thing, with like what the outliers say, 10,000 hours makes you an expert. Well, you got to start somewhere, you got to start with the first hour, the first 20 minutes, or even the seconds. So that's why I always say, don't ever throw your baby out with the bathwater. All these years that you've existed in the world and craft or came up with all sorts of different ways to look at your craft is going to be who you show up with on the page. And that's awesome. I love reading someone's voice. It's like, oh, I love this person because I like the person. I always say, be careful of meeting the authors after the fact because you might not like them. And it's like, oh my God, how did you just change? Like, I know, but life. It's always, keep your mind open and, no one's perfect. No one's perfect.
Meg, this has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so, so much. Where can people connect with you and where can they get your books?
So I do have a webpage. It is megnocero.com, my name. Also, my email, you can contact me through mac@mac.com. Also, my books are available everywhere that books are sold. Check out Barnes & Noble, indie bookstores, all of it. So Amazon, everything. So, go out there and check out what Butterfly Awakens is about. I have a TEDx too called Wake Up. And it really does challenge each of us to grab onto our own narratives in life and start to be, the master of our fate. What do we want to see happen? How do we want to see our stories unfold? So go check that out as well. And I have a YouTube show called Manifesting with Meg, Conversations with Extraordinary People. And also it's a podcast and amazing authors as well. So I am all over the internet.
Meg, thank you so, so much. This has been phenomenal.
No, also, thank you so much, Jen. You're delightful. And I've just enjoyed it as well.